3 to 6 months. That is the time that separates you from becoming richer than 99% of people, or from remaining stuck where you are for the next 10 years. Most people will work hard their entire lives and die poor, not for lack of effort, but because no one had the courage to tell the truth about money. While you optimize habits and wake up earlier, someone is quietly repositioning and will capture in months what would take you decades to achieve. Pause videos. Pay attention. Most content that claims it will make you wealthier than 99% of people usually starts by appealing to your sense of morality. Wake up earlier, work harder, stay disciplined, refine your habits, push a bit further. It feels like a fair promise, and that is precisely why it is so easy to accept for those still trapped inside the system. But in the world of 2026, that promise is subtly misleading, not because effort has no value, but because it rests on an assumption you likely do not possess. Structural leverage. It suggests that pressing the accelerator harder will set you apart. Yet the engine is running on a road where speed has already been neutralized by overcrowding. Machiavelli recognized this 5 centuries ago without relying on data or charts. Power does not belong to those who try harder, but to those who position themselves more effectively. The world does not reward virtue. It rewards positioning. And 2026 has only made this reality clearer, harsher, and impossible to ignore. The core truth of this video is simple and uncomfortable. Today, effort is not scarce, discipline does not set you apart, and hard work is no longer the dividing line. Millions of people across the world do exactly what they were taught to do, with near-religious precision, and remain financially stagnant. They are not failing because they are lazy. They are failing because they are operating within a structure where intensity has become the baseline required merely to avoid being pushed out. The objective is not to do more. The objective is to confront what most people avoid. You do not surpass 99% of people by improving inside a structurally broken system. You win by stepping outside the game they insist on playing, before the ceiling removes any real possibility of escape. And this is where the title stops being marketing and becomes a strategic frame. 3 to 6 months is not a miracle, nor a motivational claim. It is a time frame short enough to force a decision without illusion, and long enough to reposition your entire life. As long as you stop trying to outperform others in a space where superiority has already been flattened by the crowd. Until the end, you will not receive motivation. You will receive a structural law and a method. But before any method works, you need to recognize exactly what keeps you weak. The belief that discipline on its own buys you an exit. This is the point where most people surrender the game without realizing it. See, the common man loves the idea of work more for a reason he will never admit out loud. Because it is an order that does not require a change of identity. Working more allows him to remain exactly the same person, on the same path, with the same emotional security, only more tired, busier, more productive. The advice, be more disciplined, is the perfect drug. It gives a sense of control and virtue without requiring real repositioning. That is why this lie has persisted for decades, not because it is economically true, but because it is psychologically comforting. Effort is controllable. You wake up earlier, you go to sleep later, you check boxes. Position, on the other hand, is terrifying. Position requires you to admit that you may have been walking in the wrong direction for years, that the map is wrong. That virtue guarantees nothing. In another era, this worked. When competition was local, when information was scarce, when consistency was rare, showing up already placed you above 70% of the population. But 2026 is not an era of scarcity of effort. It is an era of pathological abundance of effort. The market is full, overflowing, with people who wake up at 5 in the morning, go to sleep at 11 at night, grind routine like religion, track habits in apps, consume productivity content as if it were oxygen. If everyone works hard, hard work becomes baseline, and when something becomes baseline, it no longer separates anyone. It only keeps you acceptable, competitive enough not to be eliminated. In crowded systems, effort is not rewarded. It is neutralized, canceled out by abundance. Most people are confined within saturated structural lanes, corporate roles with clearly defined income limits, freelance platforms where pricing is dictated by algorithms and constant comparison, small local businesses operating on thin margins while competing with dozens of nearly identical competitors, and digital ecosystems where an algorithm effectively determines who thrives and who disappears. Inside these lanes, additional effort rarely translates into proportional financial gain. It simply reinforces your position. You become more dependable, more compliant, slightly more difficult to replace, yet still entirely replaceable. This is not advancement. It is confinement. It is upkeep. And that is why so many individuals feel both exhausted and stagnant at the same time. Doing more, earning the same, with nothing truly compounding. Money is indifferent to how busy you are. It responds to where you are placed within the value chain and whether your role is essential, not optional. Then emerges the most costly vulnerability of all, the attachment to safety. Safe paths appear responsible because they are widely chosen, but the crowd does not generate opportunity, it consumes it. The moment a path becomes safe, it becomes exposed. Exposure draws competition. Competition multiplies supply. When supply multiplies, individual value deteriorates. This is the silent cost of following the crowd. You do not feel like you failed. You feel like you are doing what is right. It seems to be working. You are sustaining yourself, maintaining the routine, yet the ceiling remains fixed, controlled externally. And the worst part, the more disciplined you are within a path with a low ceiling, the faster you reach that ceiling. Discipline alone does not build wealth. It produces reliability. And reliability serves systems, companies, and structures, not individuals who seek to exit them. So the question almost no one raises is, what if the issue is not a lack of effort, but an excess of obedience? Now, before moving forward, do something uncommon. Pause for a moment and observe the reaction this idea triggers in you. If it irritates you, it is because it has touched a belief you rely on as emotional support. The belief that, if I do everything correctly, the world owes me a result. This form of morality is the most refined chain ever designed, because it keeps you compliant without you noticing. And those who are compliant do not create leverage. They endure, they tolerate, they wait. If you made it this far, subscribe to the channel. Not as a favor, not as an automatic gesture, as a symbolic cut. Every video that comes after this is one less layer of naivety, one less layer of comfortable belief. And now declare this in public, because internal decisions without an external mark become empty promises that evaporate at the first difficulty. In the comments, write just one sentence. Short, without explanation, without context. A sentence that seals your pact with the law that follows. I do not run, I reposition. Writing this is not about engagement. It is about submission to the method, Those who write cross the psychological line between hearing and applying. Those who do not write continue negotiating with themselves and call it prudence. The rest of the video is for those who understand that, in 2026, too much prudence has become just another name for slow condemnation. And from here, things become truly uncomfortable. The law is this: money does not reward effort, intelligence, or morality. Money responds to position. And position is not title. It is not a degree. It is not being good at what you do. Position is a structural relationship between what you do and what the system needs to keep functioning. The question that defines your real income is brutal and simple. What breaks if you disappear tomorrow? If the answer is nothing, you have no leverage. And without leverage, discipline only turns you into a well-trained resource inside a machine that replaces you without remorse, without warning, without guilt. Machiavelli would see this without any sentimentality. Power does not belong to those who try harder. It belongs to those who become necessary or inevitable. The world does not pay virtue. The world pays for dependence, bottlenecks, just and consequence. Value concentrates where decisions stall, where money flow does not pass without permission, where coordination is rare and replacement is expensive. The masses think in tasks and hours, and that is why they remain replaceable forever. The real economy operates in positions, and that is why results seem unfair to those who still believe in moral meritocracy. Because they are not moral, they are structural. Inside any system, there are three unseen layers. The first is the interchangeable layer: standardized work, predictable results, rapid onboarding, easy substitution. This is where income hits a ceiling because the risk of losing you is limited. The system does not depend on you. It has several others ready to perform the same function. The second layer is difficult to replace: technical expertise, built-up experience, knowledge of internal dynamics. If you leave, there is disruption, but the system adjusts over time and with resources. There is leverage here, but it is unstable and short-lived. The third layer is the unavoidable, the point at which decisions stall without you, where value stops moving without your direct involvement, where your absence triggers immediate and visible disorder. At this level, income becomes nonlinear. Time detaches from reward. You can work 3 hours and earn more than someone who worked 60. And these roles are not granted through compliance. They are claimed through risk, assumed responsibility, and deliberate structural positioning. This is where it becomes clear why discipline does not make you rich is not cynicism. It is a precise observation. One discipline amplifies what you are already doing. If your actions exist within a structurally capped range, discipline only helps you reach that ceiling faster and tolerate remaining there longer without collapse. Modern productivity culture glorifies order, neatness, control, flawless habits, carefully engineered routines. But real wealth is not the result of an organized life. It comes from measurable outcomes and strategic positioning. A tidy life impresses onlookers. A useful life, one that produces real money, is often disorderly. Constant pressure, managed instability, rapid decisions without full information, exposure to public scrutiny. In 2026, execution and production have become commodities. Anyone with internet access can learn to execute. AI is already replacing execution across multiple layers. What has become scarce, and therefore valuable, is strategic positioning. Control over distribution, coordination between moving parts, ownership of channels, and the willingness to take real risk. Those who fail to grasp this remain confined to optimizing their own enclosure, making it more comfortable, more attractive, more efficient. But it remains an enclosure. And this leads us to the point that separates those who understand the theory from those who will actually act. Now understand why 3 to 6 months can be real, and why, in other eras, this would sound like a cheap internet scam. In stable periods, fast wealth seems like a lie because stability rewards slow depth, institutional patience, a linear career over decades. Except 2026 is not stability. It is a period of accumulated rupture. Technology runs faster than institutions, than regulations, than culture, than the human capacity to adapt beliefs. And when the world runs like this, gaps emerge. Gaps between the old and the new, between what has died and what has not yet been born. Gaps generate asymmetry of information, of position, of timing. Asymmetry generates concentrated wealth. The speed that matters is not working faster. It is deciding and repositioning before equilibrium returns, before the gap closes. AI does not destroy opportunity. AI violently displaces opportunity. When execution becomes cheap, when anyone can generate text, image, code, analysis, the skill of doing loses relative value in the market. What gains exponential value is controlling distribution channels, controlling coordination between people, controlling the slice where the final decision gets locked in, controlling ownership of audience or brand. That is why, in phases of technological transition, those who move first seem reckless and risky, and those who move last seem rational and responsible, until they realize too late that their rationality was just fear disguised with good intellectual justification. This is not abstract theory. It is an observable pattern of any major transfer of wealth in history. Those who move early capture the structural vacuum before it is filled by competition. Those who move late write long posts on LinkedIn explaining why it was impossible to know and it was too risky. The difference between the two groups is not capability. It is timing and tolerance for social discomfort. And this is where the most unsettling revelation emerges. The real enemy is not ignorance. It is the emotional attachment to safety. People rarely fail due to a lack of information. Information is omnipresent, free, and so abundant it becomes overwhelming. They fail because they are psychologically dependent on stability. Irregular income feels threatening, even when its potential is 3 times greater. Appearing socially foolish hurts more than remaining financially stagnant. Earning money through low-status paths, selling online, producing content, offering direct services, clashes with an ego conditioned by corporate prestige. Comfort numbs, while quietly draining potential. The human mind is wired to avoid perceived loss more than to chase possible gain, so it opts for slow, unseen deterioration over visible, judgeable risk. Information, by itself, does not drive action. A threat to safety does. And as long as some form of safety remains, even if it is illusory, even if it is fragile, understanding breaks down. You grasp the theory, agree with the analysis, even share the video. But you do not move, because there is still an exit, there is still a job, there is still a justification. This is why genuine transformation almost always starts with loss, not inspiration. As long as an emotional escape route exists, your nervous system never fully commits. You test, experiment, prepare more, and label it responsibility. But it is negotiation with yourself. The psychological point of no return is reached when you eliminate the exit. Remove financial buffers, remove social justifications, Shall remove outdated identities that shield you from the risk of looking foolish. When there is no refuge, the mind stops dramatizing and begins to operate with precision. Focus appears because confusion has become too costly, and it is precisely at this moment, invisible to outsiders, that real leverage starts to form, when the only direction left is upward. But up how? Up to where? That is where the method comes in. The method is not complex. Complexity is often just an elegant hiding place for intellectual cowardice. Beating 99% of people in 3 to 6 months requires 3 moves, simple to describe, brutal to execute, and psychologically expensive to sustain. The first move is to leave bands that do not touch money directly. This includes support functions, operational functions, two functions where your value needs to be interpreted by someone before being priced by the market. You can be excellent and still remain cheap because your impact does not touch anyone's revenue. It touches process, quality, organization, support, help. These are layers where you become useful, even indispensable in daily operations, but not inevitable in the structure. And usefulness in modern capitalism is easily absorbed without changing your income. If you do not influence revenue in a direct and measurable way, you are in a territory of eternal replacement. The second move is to reposition into zones of direct contact with money, places where your actions change revenue immediately, and market feedback is inevitable and fast. This is not glamour, it is pure friction. And it is where responsibility is real, because the result shows up with no possibility of excuse or interpretation. Most people avoid these zones like the plague because they expose incompetence without filter, too fast, in front of everyone. But that is exactly what makes these zones valuable. They punish illusion, accelerate brutal learning, and create leverage earlier because they force you to deliver results, not performance. Direct contact with money is what separates occupation from real value generation. The third move is to compress effort into a short, aggressive, unsustainable period to reach escape velocity, not as a permanent lifestyle, but as a tactical operation of 3 to 6 months. Long-term inside the wrong band only means staying wrong longer, with more comfort, with more justification. To go short-term with controlled intensity during repositioning removes romanticization and fantasy. In a few weeks, you find out whether you have real traction or if you are just deluding yourself. You stop living off motivational hope and start living off cold data. This period demands surgical coldness. Cut distractions, cut social vanity, cut the old identity that no longer serves. You are not improving life habits. You are executing a structural escape. Now apply this to the 3 archetypes trapped in different cages, but with the same ceiling. The employee assumes their issue is a low paycheck or a lack of internal recognition. But the actual issue is value diluted through layers and structural dependence on approval. They exchange time and standardized output in an environment where reliability earns them more tasks, not leverage or ownership. The method here demands repositioning into roles and contexts where impact is directly measurable and where your absence creates immediate pain, not discomfort, pain. It is not about moving up a step within the same hierarchy. It is about relocating to the structural point where revenue decisions and money flow stall without you. The small business owner assumes that owning a business equals automatic freedom, but many end up as prisoners of their own system, operating 16 hours a day, chronically drained, stuck in compressed margins, competing with dozens of other small players along obvious and saturated paths. The method here is not to work harder inside the business. It is to redesign the business position. Engineer an artificial bottleneck? Control your own distribution. Choose control supply through real scarcity. Create structural dependency in the client. Or abandon the saturated model altogether. Without control over the channel or ownership of the relationship, you are simply another vendor in a crowded market shouting louder. The content creator and the digital freelancer assume that visibility equals automatic leverage, but visibility without control of the channel turns into pathological platform dependence. The platform shifts its algorithm, and you disappear overnight. The method here requires converting scattered attention into consolidated ownership. An email list, a direct channel without intermediaries, a proprietary product, recurring agreements, controlled distribution, coordinated community. It is not enough to be known and replaceable at the same time. You must become inevitable for a specific group, at a precise point of purchase, with a clear mechanism of recurrence. Otherwise, you are just performing for the algorithm for free. Notice, the method does not ask for moral justification. It does not ask you to be good. It asks for cold courage to accept short, visible, judgeable discomfort, to escape long, invisible, accepted ceilings. It asks you to abandon the comfortable narrative of responsible safety that keeps 99% occupied, tired, and capped at the same time. And when you do this, something changes inside. The internal transformation is not becoming a better worker or an optimized version of yourself. It is becoming a conscious operator of strategic position. At some point, after you execute the 3 moves and survive the initial chaos period, something changes in how you process reality. You stop measuring your life by effort invested and start measuring it by consequence generated. You stop taking pride in impeccable routine and start taking pride in structural control. And the internal feeling is strange at first. Less dramatic emotion, more cold calculation. Not because you became empty or cynical, but because you became lucid. The final state, inevitable for those who reposition early and endure the pressure, is this. Time decouples from reward. You are no longer selling hours in a crowded band where every hour is worth the same. You are influencing value flow at strategic points. Your income stops being linear because you stopped being replaceable. You do not depend on system approval to survive because you are structurally inserted where the system needs you to function. And this changes everything in practice. You make decisions faster because you do not need every move to look safe socially. You tolerate short-term instability because you understood that excessive stability was the prison disguised as prudence. Socially, this also shows up in subtle ways. People start adjusting their behavior to your pace without you needing to ask or demand. Not because you shout or impose, but because you no longer need to. You do not negotiate with visible urgency. You do not beg with constant presence. You move like someone who internalized that the economic game is not moral, not fair, not based on abstract merit. It is structural, positional, and indifferent to narratives. And because of that, you stop acting as a victim of the market and start acting as the architect of your own place in it. This is the precise moment when becoming wealthier than 99% stops sounding like a slogan and turns into a simple statistical outcome. Because most people don't fail due to a lack of technical ability. They fail because they keep choosing crowded lanes, trying to outperform others in the same traffic by pushing harder than everyone else. You succeeded because you took a different path while it was still open, and tolerated the judgment of those who labeled you irrational for stepping off the main route. But there is still one final layer. At this point, you recognize the unseen threshold that separates results in 2026. There is no hidden ultimate tactic. There is no mystical 7-step system. pure effort, high technical skill, and relentless discipline are no longer decisive by themselves. What matters is the speed at which you reposition strategically. One group will keep refining increasing effort for diminishing returns. The other will accept temporary instability and social scrutiny in order to leave saturated zones early. Both groups will work intensely. Both will give their all. Only one will build compounding wealth. Most people will not do this because the emotional cost of abandoning visible security for invisible opportunity is too high. They will label you reckless, arrogant, unstable, irresponsible, and they will continue doing the right thing within paths that squeeze margins and limit ceilings for years. You don't need to persuade them. You don't need to prove anything to anyone before moving, or you just need to not be there anymore when they finally realize, too late, that they were confined. Repeat the mantra, not as an empty motivational phrase, but as an internal sentence that guides decision. I do not run, I reposition. And if this passed through you with real discomfort, leave it publicly recorded in the comments, because whoever records commits. And whoever commits cuts their own emotional exit. You do not beat 99% by being technically better within the same saturated path they chose. You beat 99% by simply not competing in the same place as them anymore. Comment, subscribe. The next videos are already on the screen. Continue your mental training.